watch out for when people say, you should tell your story, you should share a story. What part of your story is the most important to lining up with the goal of that event? Because that's what's effective, not just getting up on stage and trauma dumping. So realizing that what people are actually looking for is how it made you feel. That's the key.
Welcome to Women Thrive podcast. This is where you'll get to hear incredible stories of female entrepreneurs, business owners, women from all walks of life. Myself, Raymond Jan, and my co-host Abigail will be interviewing incredible women, hearing inspiring stories of women from all around the world. I have no doubt that you will find something that will be life-changing for you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join us for our future episodes.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Women Thrive podcast. My name is Abigail Rebecca, and today we're going to be talking about storytelling. Now, if you have been part of our community for a while, if you have been involved in Women Thrive Media and the events that we host, or maybe even listened to Ramanda Jan, who is the founder of Women Thrive, if you've heard her speak, you would have heard us share a lot about the power of storytelling. How when we can share our story, we draw our audience to us. And actually what it does is it creates a situation where our ideal clients and cohorts can really understand a little bit more about us, the reasons why we do what we do. And then in turn, they can feel inspired to make transformation in their lives. But one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, Abby, okay, I want to share my story, but actually how much of my story do I share? Like, do I really go there and share everything, or do I hold back? And at what point does it stop being authentic? And so we're going to have this conversation today. So if that is something that you've often asked yourself, or you're wondering about how to share your story in a really authentic way that still protects your energy, then that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I am very, very excited to introduce our fabulous guest today. Her name is Devin Sarno. She's a US national champion public speaking coach. She's a performer and founder of Parlay Communicators. With over 15 years of experience, she blends her love for live performance, improv, and comedy to help others find their unique voice. Devin's engaging and compassionate coaching style empowers individuals to express themselves confidently and authentically. Welcome, Devin. It's really great to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here and talk about talking. So yeah, it is definitely something that I love to spend my time doing. As a child, if you had told me, when you grow up, this thing that you get in trouble for all the time in class, on every report card, she's very chatty, she talks too much in class, you're going to get paid for that quality, I would not have believed you. So it's super exciting to get to talk about that today with you.
I hear you. I completely resonate with that, Devin. On my report card, talks too much. I'm like, now I get paid for it.
Yeah. I was lucky enough that I was also good at talking to adults. So I usually could get the teacher on my side. Like, we're going to chat too. But definitely there were times where I was distracting in class for sure.
It's great to have you here. You are one of our speakers for the 2025 Women Thrive Summit. So if you are watching or listening to us now in real time, maybe in a few weeks' time, then we'd love for you to join us on the summit, and there will be details below in order for you to do that. But you might be watching a few years into the future, in which case, welcome. But we are so excited to have you on the stage. And I remember very clearly having that conversation with you when you were considering joining as a speaker. And I really felt your love. You love speaking.
I do. I love helping people learn how to use their voice. That is a very close thing to my heart. Yeah, it was super late at night. We talked at like 2 a.m. my time, but it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for staying up. And you were so
happy. I was excited. I was excited to talk. I told you, like, talk about talking. Let's talk.
I'd really, apart from the fact that you might have chatted a little bit when you were in school, in class, what was it that got you into doing what you're doing now? Why are you so, because you're very passionate about what you do. What is it that drives, what's your why?
I always had, growing up, like a draw to being in the spotlight, so to speak. And as a kid, that manifests itself in theater. I, at least, wasn't brought to an educational background that was going to give me the opportunity to dive into it in a public speaking avenue. Now, class presentations, speaking in front of the school, I jumped at all of those opportunities immediately. But I funneled it through theater educationally. So after school, I went and was formally trained in acting, theater, direction. And that's what I was doing with my life in my early 20s. I was auditioning, I was directing, and I was doing a lot of improv, sketch comedy. And so just constantly in that presentation space. And then I, for a number of reasons, ended up moving out of Los Angeles and to Denver, Colorado, which is such a beautiful part of our country, but not exactly Hollywood. And so I needed to find a new avenue to express this skill. And so my goal has always been in life, it wasn't to be a famous celebrity, although I wouldn't mind the free clothes, that'd be fine. But it was to be able to use my degree, my formal education, and not have to have a second job. That was always my goal. And I've been so fortunate to have found my way into competitive speech and debate in the high school level because I'm able to do that. So I was in Denver, I was directing theater in Denver, and through a series of serendipitous connections, I found my way to the speech and debate program that I work with right now. Actually, it's very exciting. They just released, and today they released the top 100 schools from the 23-24 season, and we ranked fifth in the nation by ranking. So very proud of my students from last year and really excited about that. It's just such an amazing program to be a part of, but there's elements of it that involve theater. And so I've been there for about 12 years now. And since the pandemic, I've started to realize that a lot of people need this support, this training, this access to this educational structure because they didn't get it in school, whether it be in elementary school through high school or even in their formal education afterwards. They were, focusing on the skill set that they're going to use every day. But after maybe one speech class that checked that gen ed box, they weren't given any more support in how do they take that vast knowledge they have and either share it internally at a company so that people can understand, or client facing, getting their message to the clients that they need to buy it or need to understand it. That key element is missing for so many people, and then a fear develops around it. Maybe they already had that fear of being really exposed, or maybe they're developing that fear as they step into higher stakes situations where that communication skill and being very center spotlight feels very vulnerable and draws up a lot of emotions. And so I'm there to stand in the gap and help them find their way through that space.
I love what you do, Devin, and congratulations on everything.
Thank you.
Achieved.
Thank you.
I love to hear fascinating stories like you of adventure and experience and just pure joy. And the fact that you've found something now that you really love is just wonderful. Yeah. And it's fascinating, isn't it? And a little bit shocking, I think, actually, that how we're not taught this skill to speak, because it's such a big part of anyone's life, I think, to be able to speak in public, express ourselves in that way, in any form, especially as business owners. For me, it's one of my most valuable skills. I have to be able to speak in public, and not only speak in public, but enjoy doing it. And we didn't do anything. I mean, obviously, I was brought up in the UK. We didn't do anything. Drama classes, that was it. And I was desperate to do more, and it just wasn't provided. Whereas Pythagoras theorem and all of algebra, when am I going to use that? I've never used that in my life. It really is shocking, isn't it, that we're not taught to do things in that way?
Yeah, I think in the US, especially as people learn more about the value of speech and debate, more and more districts are adding it into their curriculum. There's an amazing district in Florida that actually starts speech and debate curriculum now in elementary school. And it's just so cool. My daughter actually is here in Colorado, and she was in kindergarten last year, and she had to give a series of speeches in February. They were very short, but we practiced each week. We had a different speech we had to do. And I was so delighted because the rubric that the teacher sent home was a very simplified, but a very similar rubric to what I would be teaching my students to do in a more expansive way. And I loved that that's what they were starting with in kindergarten, even as far as there was a part on it, like audience behavior. I loved it. I loved that that was in their mindset. I was also intimidated because she feeds right into our direct competitor. I don't need these kids to be coming like phenoms this early. Like I got to beat them someday. But I do think some school districts are starting to see that in our up and coming modern workforce, the ability to stand in your own voice and express yourself, whether that be to sell a product, to advocate for something within your workforce, especially for marginalized communities, whether that be like women or people of color or people that are in a working class job, and they feel like there is extra barriers to the situation at hand than just, oh, you're my boss, I'm the employee. And to pretend there aren't those extra barriers is not realistic. That's ignorant. The idea that we can empower them from 6 years old and on to stand in their voice and know their voice has power is literally one of the most life-changing things we can give a kid before they leave to head on to their next steps. So I love that I get to do it. Plus I get to hang out with the coolest high schoolers around. I just got off a trip from New York and I laughed the whole weekend hanging out with a bunch of high school kids. So it was so super fun.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because it's really empowering when you can express yourself in that way. It's self-expression and it really helps you, to be able to stand for what you believe in and have an opinion and put in those boundaries. All of these incredible life skills. So I know that there's so many things that you teach about speaking, but today we're talking about storytelling. Why, for you, do you think it's important to share yourself in that way and tell a story? What is it about it that you think like resonates with audiences when you do that?
Yeah, there's a lot to it, but I think, and this may be something other people have said before, it's not like a revolutionary idea, but it goes back to so much of our humanity is based in this idea of seeing each other in recognizing in one another that we are more alike than we are different, because there are so many things in our world that we use to separate ourselves. But storytelling can really isolate the humanity that is common in people when done well. I think it also goes back to our roots of before we had the tools we had technology-wise and stuff, we were oral communicators first. And so capitalizing on what we innately are built to do is only going to enhance all of the other things that we have evolved to do. I think it's this idea that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Use the skill set that we've already crafted for centuries and use it to enhance the new technology and the new data and the new things that we have access to.
Yeah, I remember when I first started with my business and I worked with my first, she was like a business coach, but she specialized in marketing. And I remember her saying that if you ever feel like you can't achieve something or you're not good enough, if there's that whole imposter syndrome piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
To go and listen to the story of someone who has made it, someone that you admire, and listen to their story and seek out the commonalities, because you will be able to find things in common with them. And when you can find things in common with a person who you deem to be successful, a person that you admire and aspire to be, you can start to then reposition it as, I've got something in common with them. We're very similar. And therefore, if they can do it, I can do it too. I'm just like them. It's just I need to learn this, this, and this to do it. And so I love that you've spoken about that, because it can really help to bring down those barriers and bring out the humanness in business.
Yeah. And I think we only see ourselves, and we see ourselves from all our flaws. We know ourselves from jump, right? And so we know our story. We know why we are not perfect, not unique in the sense that something about us made it like luck that we fell into this. So we know that we were like grinding, we were hustling, we know where we struggle still. But what we forget is that, especially in modern technology, you put people on podcasts, you put them on TED Talks, you put them on TV, you put them in these splashy lights, and Hollywood gets involved. And all of a sudden, it's very existential. They only exist in that one moment to us, and we don't know anything else about them. And we start to separate ourselves from them because we think they're so polished, they're so pretty, they're so informed, they're so educated because they've got that brand on them from that particular school. We're not like them. And the reason that I think we are more inclined to want to say we're not like them than we are like them innately is because it offers control. Because if I'm not like you, who has this beautiful business, who's successful, who's thriving, and it's because you have some special things that I don't, then it's not my fault. It's not my fault that I'm not where you are. It's because you had a privilege, you had something, and I can either excuse myself or justify in my brain why I'm not there yet. And we can start to live with that a little bit. And so it's easier for us to distance ourselves from super successful people sometimes because we're like, okay, they're different. And it's okay that I'm not there. I can deal with that pain that's coming up if that's the situation. But when the storyteller gets on stage and they start to break down that shine, they start to dismantle that Hollywood glow and make them a real bona fide human, we shift and we start seeing where we're alike. And then hopefully, if we're in a good headspace, that becomes inspirational as opposed to justifying why we're not there. And so that's, I think, a key reason why, as a storyteller, you never want people walking away from a sales pitch, a business connection or whatever, feeling so intimidated that they want to draw distance from you. You want them to be inspired to work with you. Even if it's something like buying your product or whatever, you want them leaving with a closer connection to you because they're drawing near to you, not away from you and putting up distance that you don't even know exists because you don't know their story. You don't know why they're putting up that distance. And so that would be, I think, an argument for why tell a story when you're selling auto parts. It's about what people are more likely to do based on how they feel after they walk away from a meeting with you.
Oh, I love what you're talking about here. It's so true. And I completely align with everything that you're saying. Whenever I speak on stage, one of my biggest objectives is to take myself off a pedestal as quickly as possible.
100%.
Because the audience is never going to raise it. They're not going to listen to what I'm saying and exactly what you're saying. It's all right for her. She's got this, she's got that. Because I'm placed in a very privileged position because I'm on stage. So people automatically form an opinion of you.
Yeah.
And the same for any conversation sales calls. So I love that you're talking about this because we always think about storytelling as speaking on stage, but actually it's in every conversation. And here's another technique that I use a lot as well as sharing my story when I'm enrolling someone in an idea. hey, wouldn't it be fun to do this? Why don't you come and do this with
It's
me?
a pitch. Yeah, you're selling them.
As well as doing that, if I'm ever on a call and I ever feel like really intimidated by someone, and I still do,
Oh yeah, we all
um,
do.
I share my story. I share my story with them. I bring the vulnerability. And guess what? In turn, it then invites them to open up and be
Yes.
vulnerable. It's really magical when you can take a conversation to that place instead of feeling intimidated and the imposter syndrome. You're like, actually, I'm going to share my vulnerabilities and let's see if you share your vulnerabilities too. And then it becomes a really deep connection.
Yeah, and I think to say that people don't ever try to be intimidating, I think is probably not true. Like I think there are those personalities out there that love to be a little intimidating, but like they're actually few and far between.
Yeah.
Most of the time I have found, especially in the world of like competitiveness and things like that, most people, intimidation is a me problem. I'm intimidated by you because of stories I've made up about you, because of stories I've made up about myself, and because of my previous background with situations like this that are making me feel this way. And I assume it's going to play out the same way. Most people are too busy and in their heads, and they're thinking about their own things, and they don't know that they're projecting coolness or reservedness or whatever element makes you intimidated by them. And they have no idea they're projecting that to you in that moment because they don't know what intimidates you. There's some generalized concepts of what intimidates us about people, but for the most part, being intimidated by somebody is pretty personal. What intimidates me about another human is probably not what intimidates you about another human. And so to think it's game, to think that like every person is walking into the room and can read you immediately, that's just not true. So realizing in that moment, if you start to break down your walls, just like you shared, they are going to lean in most likely and start breaking down their walls. And that item, that thing that was intimidating you will disappear because it was about you, not about them.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love your take on that. So let's talk about the stories then. So when I introduce you, by the way, I really hope that we keep that in shot because
This lovely cup.
that's
It's actually my daughter's, and I just needed a quick cup, but
it's amazing. I need that water cooler. So
yes.
storytelling. If you're encouraging me to share my story with others,
Yes.
but there is a resistance that I'm having around what do I need to sell my soul? Do I need to
Right.
do every single detail? I think there's a real fear that feel, and am told by other human beings who are being encouraged to share their stories that they're selling their soul. Or here's another one. I'm going to be giving away the family secrets, for example.
Sure.
Like all of this, like how far do you go? What's your take on that? What would you say to me if I'm going to you, Devin? I understand what you're saying, but come on, I don't want to
Right.
be sharing everything.
This kind of like circles back to the title of my talk at the moment is finding your personal bright line, because it is personal. There is I can't give a formula right now in this moment that will be universal for everybody, because your story is not universal. You are not universal. Your story is universal, but it's not one size fits all. So what you need to do is assess what the point of it is. And so let's talk in right now, like how to do that. So the very first thing about using your story comes down to, this is very similar to acting and different things. What's the goal? Why am I sharing my personal story? Because most of us, I think sometimes we also say story as if there's one, right? As if all of our nuanced, and I'm thinking of Rent right now where they like sing like 525,600 minutes, like that whole thing, like that's a year, right? It's not just one story. Usually we're talking about one pain point that propelled something, right? Or a series of events that led to some sort of transformation, but you didn't expect it to go that way. Usually people aren't getting on stage and being like, let me show you how I won everything and now I'm here. It's usually painful. And so making sure that first, the story you're choosing matches the audience, because there are different points in our lives, but depending on the goal of the audience, you might not share that particular story. There's a better one. So I think sometimes whenever people say, share your story, we all go to the immediate, deepest cut. That's not necessarily relevant for every event. And so watch out for that. Watch out for when people say, you should tell your story, you should share a story. What part of your story is the most important to lining up with the goal of that event? Because that's what's effective, not just getting up on stage and trauma dumping. But sometimes we don't know that because people say, tell your story. And to us, that deepest cut is where that story really lives the most. But then when you get to, no, it is one of those deep cut moments, I feel like that was the turning point. I feel like that was the key element to understand how I got from X, Y, and Z to here, how I became where I am. I think the really key element is to realize that Hollywood has betrayed us in a way. They have made us think that we have to share all the dirty details. They made us think that we have to put it in technicolor reality, that it has to be like I'm reading the novel and I'm hearing every detail. And that is very vulnerable, but I don't want to use vulnerable in that word. That's very exposing, right? Why should you have to get up on stage every day and let's just say you had a very traumatic event happen to you? What is the benefit to you in getting up and going through it moment by moment by moment as if you're making an Oscar-winning film? That's not necessary. So realizing that what people are actually looking for is how it made you feel. That's the key, because odds are, let's just say you're speaking at a summit or you're speaking to a large group that you want to sell a product to. Let's just say there's 100 people in the room, to make it simple. I guarantee you those 100 people have not experienced what you've experienced. Maybe some have had the misfortune of having your exact same traumatic experience to some level, but most will not. So they're not going to relate with the actionable details. They're not going to sit there and go, oh my gosh, heaven forbid that your story is that you were attacked in some way. As the audience member, I've never been attacked. Now my brain's going into what would that feel like? How would that be? And I'm off to the races, maybe, or maybe I'm distancing myself because I haven't been there. I don't know what that feels like. Now I'm distancing myself from you. Maybe if I have been there, but now that you are going in such detail, I'm feeling emotionally conflicted because I'm being brought back to my own personal trauma. My advice in this situation is to actually limit that part and extend how that experience made you feel. Because that is what matters in life. Because to go back to the idea of being attacked, if you were attacked in some way, that horrible moment, that's awful and traumatic, and no one should ever experience that. But that is nothing in comparison to the aftermath of emotional feelings and what that did to you and how that affected you. And the thing about emotions is that's what's universal. Feeling less than, feeling ashamed, feeling broken, feeling like you have it written all over your face, feeling like you will never be the same. We've all felt those feelings. Maybe the trigger was different for each one of us, but we've all felt ashamed. We've all felt broken. We've all sat there and said, everyone knows. No one will ever look at me the same. And so when you talk about how that made you feel, I sit in that audience and I say, I've been there. May have not been the attack, but my personal thing, I know you, I see you, I connect with you. And so that is really where storytelling comes into this beautiful tool when you can shorten the narrative to a degree and expand the impact.
Devin, that's such valuable information you've shared with us today. Thank you so much. Thank you for breaking it down and explaining it so simply, because I think there'll be so many people that will be listening and watching this and the light bulbs will be going on.
Yeah.
Because I think about when I listen to a really compelling story, if I'm going to an event or I'm watching a show or something and someone is sharing their story, a really great story, like you say, is a story that I can relate to, even though I don't come from their background. I've never had that situation, but
and I never will because of wherever it is. Yeah.
But what they're speaking about, I can relate to because I felt like that. I'm like, I might not relate to the incident, but I relate to the story. And also I'm really inspired by the transformation. So basically what you're saying is a really good story doesn't have to go into the details of the event. What it needs to talk into is the emotion of that and then leading on to the transformation. Because there's a reason, obviously, that you're sharing it, right? To bring your audience, like, this is what I've been through. Like, if you resonate with that, you can come with me. I'll help you do this.
And I think too, it's a lot of also remembering the format, right? Because we're talking about using your story in business settings, in public speaking settings. I'm not talking about writing your memoir, or although I do think this is still an effective tool in that, although you may be able to do both. I'm talking about you've been given 30 minutes on this stage to accomplish a million things. And so it's a balance. And knowing in that 30 minutes, where should I spend my time? And that is where I think you get the most bang for your buck. Is I've even seen it effectively done where literally somebody just said, I had an event happen to me, or in my childhood, I experienced things that are hard to talk about, but this is what they made me feel. And they can be just as effective. So when you talk about like revealing the family secrets, or my mom or dad will hear this and I'm not ready to have that out on a public platform because that will crush them, but I need to talk about it. You can do this because it's not about what happened. It's about how it made you feel.
Wonderful. It's great advice. Devin, you've shared so much value on our chat today. What would people expect from you when they come and watch your talk on the Women Thrive Summit?
I'm going to take this idea and I'm going to expand it, and I'm going to get more into the details of how that looks narratively. What do I do? How do I incorporate my story in a way that's effective, that doesn't feel stuck in, that doesn't feel manipulative, and doesn't feel awkward? I'm supposed to tell my story, but I don't know where to fit that in amongst the data. Like, how do I take my story and then weave it into whatever it is I should be talking about? Because that's really what it's all about, right? We're not talking about getting up on stage and just doing a personal dialogue, although that may be true. It's about how you weave it in to be effective within your working environment. So I'm going to expand on tips and tools and just like the structure for that.
Amazing. I'm really looking forward to it. And of course, you can click on the link below and either come join us on the next summit, or again, if you're watching this in the future, then you can go and watch the replay on the link below. Devin, I could talk to you for a long time about this. It's fascinating. I love your take on all of this. I really do. How can our audience connect with you? What is the best way?
Sure. Yeah, I have a website for my company, Parlay Communicators. On that website, you can contact me if you are interested in working with me as a coach, or if you would like to bring me in as a speaker for your organization. I am open to both of those. I am also on LinkedIn under Devin Sarno, as well as Parlay Communicators. And you can also find me on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook under Devin Sarno. And I look forward to talking to anybody who is interested in expanding their ability to get up and tell their story effectively, because you can do it. You even in fear, you can get better at it. It is a learnable skill. I'd love to share that if you come to my website and you connect with me, I'd like to share a tool for decreasing anxiety in public speaking. So I'll give you a little kind of one sheet that will have some actionable steps to reduce anxiety in the moment when you are public speaking. So I'd love to share that free tool with you if you connect with me.
Lovely. We'll put all the links down at the bottom. Thank you so much, Devin. Thank you for coming and sharing your wonderful wisdom with us today and your energy. Thank you for
Thanks so much. I enjoyed talking about it.
It's been
Thank you
great.
for having me.
You're welcome. It's our pleasure. And thank you so much, everyone, for watching, for listening. Be sure to reach out if you have any questions. Go follow Devin. She's amazing. She's so inspirational. Lots of practical advice you will get if you follow her. I'm sure that you would have gained so much knowledge from our talk today. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Women Thrive podcast. Have an amazing day, whatever you're doing.
Thank you for tuning in to Women Thrive podcast. If you found today's episode empowering and inspiring, be sure to subscribe and follow us. Better yet, leave a review and share it with others. We're committed to bringing you more stories that will empower and inspire you on your own journey. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep pursuing your dreams.